Three Demons, Book 2, Chapter 5, Episode Kazuto. As snow falls from the sky, the land being covered in soft layers, Kazuto looks out from the hopper where he has been stationed, staring out at the scenery as a winter wonderland begins to take form. Kazuto looks back forward into the cold, dark, empty cellar he and several others have been put into. Everyone in this cellar, all children, malnourished to the point of seeing their bones through their skin, their clothes ripped, not a glimmer of emotion in any of them, each already pleading for death's sweet release, despite being so young. A siren begins sounding off, the dark cellar being covered in a bright red light, something that used to terrify these children. Now, not a reaction from any of them. Three different men walk into the cellar, screaming at all of the children, telling them to get into a single file line. But at this point, the kids had become so weak, none of them could move into the desired single file line. Damned kids! A guard violently grabs a small girl, no older than 4, by her bony arm. However, the force was so much that her frail, brittle arm snaps like a twig as she screams out in pain, as she lays on the ground in her hand being dragged and pulled by one of the guards. Suddenly, a man whose features are distinct yet vivid walks in. He is neatly dressed compared to the guards. He looks down at the girl crying and the man grabbing at her broken arm. "What did I say about damaging the test subjects?" the man calmly asked, looking at the 3 guards, specifically the one that had been responsible for the supposed damages. The guard tries to defend himself as the man just stared back at him, calm yet stern. The guard begins screaming in pain, grabbing his head as the pain becomes so much that he falls down to his knees, his ears beginning to bleed so much they begin pouring out in between his fingers as the guard tries to stop the bleeding with his hands. The guard begins going into rigor mortis, his body begins becoming stiff, foam-like saliva mixed with blood begins pouring out of his mouth, before silence fills the room. The man turns back at the other 2 guards. Since she's been compromised, kill her. He leaves the room, ordering the 2 guards to kill the small, broken little girl. One of the guards pulls out a gun, pointing it at the girl. The girl, her eyes widened, tears flowing, her body shaking. He pulls the trigger, causing her blood to be splattered against the 6 remaining children. Fear has once again been found in these children. However, they stay silent, their heart begins racing, scared that they'd be next. Despite having asked for the release of death, they've realized something. It's not going to be sweet. Kazuto, only being 4 years old himself, was taken a year ago from his parents. Kazuto thinks about them every day, though he has forgotten what the 2 have even looked like. Every day the words are, "You are doing a service to his Holy Spirit and to those who do the Lord's bidding, by being a martyr for his cause." Kazuto has heard it multiple times a day, every day, to the point his only thoughts outside of death are those words. Needles injected in Kazuto, sometimes the color of the liquids inside the syringes are gold, sometimes red. Maybe even a color Kazuto himself doesn't even recognize. It's become a game for Kazuto at this point, to guess what today's color of injection will be. It's seemingly the only thing that makes the time go by. Since that day, each of the remaining 6 have been strapped to dollies, the guards making sure not to snap any of the bones from the children, as they are wheeled into a new room every single day. It makes the children wonder how deep underground they've gotten. One by one, the children were wheeled into this room. 7 vats filled with golden liquid, 1 for each of the 7, now 6, children to be lowered into. The only words, "Hold your breath," were told as they were dropped into the liquid. Nothing for them to breathe out of for air, nothing to protect their eyes, nothing. Within 20 seconds, 2 of the children already begin struggling, trying to bang on the glass, but they're so weak they can't muster the strength to do so. An entire minute goes by. A child, maybe just a little under 2 years old, the bubbles coming from their mouth, cease. The guards shake their heads as they write down something on a notepad. The same thing happens to a second child. The guards do the same thing with their notepad. Kazuto himself begins struggling, but he's sunk to the bottom of the tank. He is lightheaded, lying there for close to 6 minutes before he begins feeling the need to breathe. However, thoughts of just giving up fill his mind. The endless torment would be over if he did. Kazuto then hears crashing and waves. He doesn't know what the sound is. His first guess is the Grim Reaper has come to collect his soul. A bright light engulfed him as the tank he was in shatters. He flops like a fish onto the ground. Kazuto and the other two children gasp for air as the guards just look down upon them. The guards continue to write down in their notepads. Despite everything, only half of them could survive 10 minutes? A guard screams, throwing his notepad on the ground out of frustration. Kazuto began to regain some of his strength. He can now twitch his body, something he and the others weren't able to do before. The guards do take notice of this, however. They point at Kazuto and all walk towards him, all like shadows with an evil intent behind them. They all grab Kazuto, strapping him back onto the dolly. But he was not taken back to the cellar he had been confined to for over a year, this time in an operating room. Kazuto is strapped to the table as doctors of some kind walk in. Needles were injected into every part of Kazuto's body, some to extract blood and others to inject more substances into his bones, a man says to a nearby guard. Seems like the experimentation's a failure. Instead of your desired outcome of him wielding Excalibur, he can move his bones, make them denser, etc. We've snapped his arms, left him here overnight with an open wound and everything. Come back the next morning, his bone has healed itself on its own. The guard then calls someone over the phone, only saying 1 or 2 words every few seconds. He puts his phone away and looks at the doctor. Burn the place down. Kazuto's eyes widen. He tries to struggle, but he can't seem to get loose from his restraints. As the men left, Kazuto was just left there, struggling for what seemed like hours to him. The smell of smoke begins to fill the room. Kazuto then continues to struggle, his bones snapping and popping with every attempt. It eventually causes Kazuto to force the operating table to fall on its side, leaving Kazuto hanging from the bed. He then begins to pull his left hand out of their strength, causing him to dislocate both his hand and his shoulder in the process. Kazuto screams out from all the pain, but he's not giving up, as the smell of burning skin begins to fill the air. Kazuto knows the others have already been hit by the flames. Kazuto struggles to get any of his other limbs loose, his struggling causing the table to hit other equipment, a vial of acid smacking him on the head, leaving glass in his scalp while the acid slowly begins to burn him. Kazuto begins dragging and hopping towards the exit of the operating room. He is still strapped to this table. He gets to the door, but finds himself being unable to get through the door. It's not big enough. Kazuto looks up and sees the fire outside the door. He begins to give up. He loses consciousness from all the pain and the smoke he has inhaled. Kazuto then wakes up in a bed, a room he's never seen before. Oh, so you're awake now. Good. Kazuto looks up at the man in front of him, neatly dressed, a guard surrounding his head, with fire coming from it. Kazuto realizes he's looking at Hades himself. End of Chapter 5.